All right, let her rip.
All right. Well, the first one that I had is that when I talked to my friends about interviewing you, because the first thing I did was message my friend Candace and say I'm getting to interview Drive Past Truckers, and she sent me all of these articles and essays that you'd written in the Bitter Southerner, which I just were wonderful. And also listening to your albums, and of course my favorite one of your albums is American Band because of the political take on that. And all your music has that interweaving of the current political and historically Southern political themes. I'd like to know why those themes are particularly important to you, and how do you balance the entertainment of your music with the messages that you want to send?
Right. I mean, for starters, I was, a huge Clash fan as a young man, and middle school onward, and like when I was first learning to play guitar and really, wanting to do this thing that I've ended up being lucky enough to do, they were a huge influence on me, and I really loved how they balanced, being a rock and roll band, but also activists and speaking out about, things that concern them. You know, Cooley and I grew up in North Alabama, which is, a very politically conservative place. And it's been in the news a lot actually this week over here because they've just passed a very draconian law about in vitro fertilization, and I mean it's awful. It's horrific what they're doing, and so I kind of grew up speaking out about things that were happening politically in my home state, my hometown, and beyond, and of course came of age during the Reagan years here, and which he was wildly popular at the time in the United States, but he also did a lot of things that I really disagreed with, and a lot of which are, we're still dealing with the fallout from 40 years later, nearly half a century later. He set the stage for a lot of the problems we're having right now as a country. And, and he wrapped it in such a grandfatherly charm and Hollywood charm that he was able to be, wildly popular with some of the very people whose futures he was undoing. And, particularly in relation to unions and things like that. So it's kind of just always been part of who I am and what I do as far as the songwriting and activism aspect of it. I've always considered my band to be, to a varying degree, very political. Obviously with the American Band record, we kind of turned it up a couple of notches and were maybe a little more direct, I guess, in our approach about it. But I think that's always been part of what we do. I mean, I consider Southern rock opera to be, a political thing, even though, at the time it might not have always been understood as that.
I found when you were talking about the interesting part of Reagan in your song Wallace, where you talk about in his last election that 90% of people that elected him were African Americans, which were when you said some of the very people that were that their policies were against ended up voting for them.
Yeah, the Wallace thing is really complicated because he did get over 90% of the black vote in his last election, but in all fairness, the person he was running against was so far to the right and so extreme that he really, I think, probably was the lesser of two evils, because at least he was trying to maybe at least on the surface make up for a lot of his more racist rhetoric of the past. And, he was at least reaching out to the black voters by 1982 when he ran for his final term, as opposed to the guy who was running against him, who was a very hardline right winger with some pretty heavily racist views. So it's complicated. I mean, in Alabama, it's always going to be a lesser of two evils
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
thing. Other than Doug Jones, who was a senator for a very brief minute a few years ago, and he was wonderful, but he didn't last long either. He was elected in a special election after they had impeached the person he replaced, and he really only got to serve out that term before they replaced him with one of the worst people in the whole state. So,
Wow.
but it's generally it is a lesser of two evils kind of. When you vote in Alabama, you basically hold your nose and just hope that that one is a little bit less horrible than the other one.
Well, I think that we do that in Australia as well. We're certainly our political landscape is who is the least worst.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Very similar in terms of that sort of happening. It's really great to hear, I guess, through your eyes, with that question of that song particularly. We've got a question here. Look, this is your 13th album as a band. How has the songwriting process and approach to making albums changed over the years?
It's I'm still trying to get better. I mean, I want to, I started writing songs as a kid. I started when I was 8 years old, and it's always been just part of who I am and what I do from a really young age. But I'm still working hard. I'm still wanting to write my best song, and and so there's a lot of trying to dig deeper, trying to find ways to be better, trying to write something I haven't written before or in a way I haven't done it before. And I'm less prolific as I've gotten older, which is probably has more to do with the rest of the life I'm living as opposed to I don't think my brain has dimmed that much yet. But I think a lot of being less prolific might have to do with just how busy I am because I've got a family and and running a band and doing the various things I do that take a lot of the brain space that when I was younger I didn't have to think about. I just wrote all the time. I didn't have to worry about making sure I'm able to be a functioning dad, things like that. So I didn't have kids till later in my life. So, but I do keep. I mentioned Booker T. Jones earlier. In 2009, we put out that record backing him up called Potato Hole, and making that record was a really profound experience for me as a musician, but also as a writer, because all of a sudden we were backing up a musician who most of his songs were instrumental, and all the songs on the record we did with them were instrumental songs, and it kind of required us rethinking how we do what we do, because so much of what we had in the past done musically as a band was driven by the lyrics of the song, and when that was taken away, we had a hard time at first figuring out how to do it, how to play for him. And to his credit, instead of losing patience with us or firing us and replacing us with session players or something like that, Booker sat down with us and told us stories. And before every take of every song, he would tell us what inspired the song and where he was coming from and what he was thinking about when he wrote it. And then we would play off that. And it was a life-changing experience having someone do that, because it taught me so much about, I think it taught all of us in the band so much about how we work and actually things that we were doing that we'd never actually consciously thought about. And the way he would put his songs together, because if you listen to something like Green Onions, which we've all heard a million times, hopefully, and it's such a wonderful piece of music, when you listen to it, it just sounds like it just happened. It sounds like they're jamming or something, and it's this magical thing, but it's really very thought out. He was very much, I mean, everything in that song is there for a very specific musical reason. And And we learned so much from him doing that, that I think the songs I wrote after that experience hopefully reflected some of that, because I started really working harder on the musical aspect of what I write and giving more care. I think in my earlier days, everything was built around the lyrics I wrote, and Booker kind of taught us that the musical part is every bit as important in conveying what the song's about as the lyrics, and maybe even more so. So there was a great learning from that.
Wow,
That's awesome. I'm sitting going,
that's really cool.
I'm just learning so much.
Yeah, just get a real sense of when you're talking there. And thank you. Just get a real sense of that experience. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it really was. It was an amazing experience, and like I said, we're still friends. 15 years later, I consider him someone that I just love deeply, and I hope at some point to get to work with him again. I got to play with him last summer. He came to Portland where I live, and I spent the day with him, and my wife and I went out and had dinner with he and his wife and the band, and then I sat in with him that night, and I'm always looking forward to the next time I get to hang out with him and stuff.
Yeah.
Amazing. I think that leads into, that sort of influence. But as you said, you grew up in and around Muscle Shoals and in northern Alabama. How does that play into your influence as well, with your dad being part of the Muscle Shoals sound? And I've been on to the tour of the Muscle Shoals studio and gone and stood on
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, it's amazing. And I just stood in there, and you can just absorb things from rooms. And
the tour guide there is one of my oldest, dearest friends.
Amazing
Terrell that gives that tour is he actually hired me my first job when I was 16 years old. He managed Record Bar, the record store in my hometown, and he hired me for my first job and later fired me for my first job. But we've remained friends all these decades since, and his tours are amazing. Yeah.
So brilliant. But also there's just a level of magic that I think comes out of the Tennessee River that runs through there. And I went down and I got little vials of water of the Tennessee River. Because
don't drink them.
Don't drink them. It was the wrong colour for drinking. Absolutely the wrong colour for drinking. But also with your dad being part of that, how's that then played into your influences as well?
Well, initially when I was a kid, a lot of it was just his record collection, because he was gone. He was working all the time, and so I didn't really have the typical father-son relationship in that regard. And it's not like when he came home we sat around playing together, because it wasn't that kind of thing at all. He was kind of old school in his not taking work home with him kind of thing, and even though I was very interested and wanted that, maybe at the time it just wasn't in the cards. But with him being gone, he had this pretty enormous record collection, and so I would come home from school and put on headphones and tell Mom I was going down to do homework, and then I would play records and rifle through his record collection and kind of educating myself on music history a lot from that. And because if a record had a cool album cover, then I would want to hear what it sounded like. And all of that, I think, is connected in with what I've done, what we've done since, including our love of the artwork and stuff and the packaging for our records. But I'm obviously, Cooley and I have both been influenced by having come from Muscle Shoals and a lot of the music that came out of there. Because, what they did was really amazing. And, it was just some of the greatest records ever made, in my opinion. Yeah. And I'm really proud that they came from my hometown, and in some cases, my dad.
The Aretha records from Muscle Shoals are the best ones.
They're stunning, stunning.
Stunning.
Yeah, and I love the Bobby Womack records, which don't get nearly as talked about as much because they're not as, mainstream famous, I don't guess. They were successful records, but nothing like Aretha. But Bobby Womack's a huge influence to me as a songwriter, and I wish I could say as a singer, because I wish I could sing like that. If I could, I would. I'll put it that way. And as a guitar player, he was a triple threat, because Dad would always say after Dwayne, of course, Allman, that Bobby Womack was probably his favorite guitar player that came through there, because he was an amazing guitar player.
That's
cool. That's really cool.
Good.
You want me to go?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, of course. All right, we're going with this one here. Okay, so with you and Mike as the main songwriters, how does that collaboration work, and what does each of you guys like bring to the table creatively? How does that work?
I'm probably his biggest fan. I mean, I love Cooley's songwriting, and I'm a huge fan, and have been from pretty much the first song he ever wrote onward. It's there's not a lot of collaboration in the writing aspect. I mean, Cooley's a very private kind of loner type person anyway, and so he's I would probably be the one more willing to do more open collaboration of the two of us, but he writes totally on his own, and then brings it to us, and we hear what he's written, and then go from there. And so that's kind of the way we do. I'll write my songs, he writes his songs, but once we get together with the band, we kind of throw them to the band, and then what happens, and the main writer will have a veto power if someone does something they don't like, but that doesn't happen much. I mean, generally, I'm thrilled with whatever direction my bandmates take it, which sometimes can be something I hadn't thought of myself, and something far better than what I would have thought of.
Yeah, I love that.
Love that. That's cool. That's really cool. That's interesting, because I mean, you just don't know until you ask the question. That's really nice to hear.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you've known each other since teenagers?
Yeah. Our kids are the age now that we were when we started playing together. We have, I have a 19-year-old, and he turned 19 right after we started playing together. He has, his oldest is about to turn 21, which is how old I was when we started playing together. And that's interesting. We both, I think, get a kick out of that. And as we've gotten older, we've gotten a lot closer than we've ever been too, I think. When we were young, we fought a lot. we were so different. We're such different people. We're almost like polar opposites. To have the amount of things in common that we do, obviously, our approach to those things are, we come at it from pretty opposite ends a lot of the time. But I think as we've gotten older, we've really learned to love and respect that difference, because I think it's part of what makes it such a good team. And and then, like I said, also, I'm just a huge fan of his writing. I think he's a phenomenal songwriter. I love his playing. I always look forward to hearing what he's going to do to whatever new song I've written. And I love, my time in the band where I'm getting to just be the guitar player or singing harmony on his songs. Those are most of my favorite moments, because I love that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And I'm lucky with the whole lineup with the band. I mean, I really, we've had this lineup. I mean, our band dates back 27 years now, but almost 28 years now. But and Cooley and I will hit 39 years playing together this August. But we've had, the lineup has been super solid with no changes now for 12, 13 years, and it's a magical lineup, because we all really get along great and have a kind of a wonderful working relationship as well as personal relationship.
That's amazing.
That's so cool.
With your fans, your fanatics even, who are very lovingly called the heathens, and I did find out about the sheathens, who are female and non-binary members of the heathens, which I was just in love with. But they attend. You have a function that you do every year at 40 Watt in Athens, and
Yep, it was just last weekend.
I'm going to murder the pronunciation of the place that you raise money for.
Nucci Space.
Nucci Space. I wasn't going to murder. Oh my god!
Yeah, you're right. She's on.
I'm going. My Australian accent is not going to do good things for that. But that shows, like, I mean, that's advocacy and all of those things that you do, and that your fans engage with that really quite significantly. So,
it's amazing. Our fans raised nearly $65,000 last weekend for Nucci Space, just on their own, outside of what we raise for them with our annual homecoming concert shows. They've kind of taken over this whole side part of it with the auctions and cookouts and different things that they do. And it's really, really impressive to me just how far they've run with that, and how much they've done with that. But and Nucci Space is it's an artist resource center based in Athens. Athens has such an amazing music scene and so many musicians and bands out of there. But there's in our country, there's such we're so lacking in healthcare and even more so mental health care. And unfortunately, the suicide rate amongst musicians is pretty off the charts, awful. And Nucci Space was founded by a woman named Linda Phillips, whose son Nucci Phillips committed suicide about the time we started this band, actually in 1996. And so she had this brainstorm of a way to make a difference in the music scene in that town and hopefully beyond. And it's what they've done is really amazing. And so we did our very first fundraiser for them in 2000, right before they actually opened their doors. And so now we're moving into our 25th year of doing stuff for them, and they've continued growing their mission and what they do, and it's really a beautiful thing.
That's
so amazing.
And I had one question from my my favorite heathen sheathen, Candace Fowler, has asked if you're going to continue doing your concerts in Joshua Tree as a yearly thing as well.
I'm not sure what we're going to do with that. I don't. When we would love to make it an annual thing. I'm not sure if that's going to happen or if we're going to be able to do it this year or not. It's kind of still a work in progress. I definitely would love to see something like that happen at some point.
Excellent. She'll be happy that I asked that question, and that was purely for her.
Hey, I'm sorry. I've got someone in our door, and I also have to plug in my computer because it's about to die on me, and I don't want that to happen. And a friend of my kids has just come over. Hi.
Hi.
And so let me move in here so I can plug this thing in, and so that I don't lose you in the middle of a question or something.
For you, so we don't want to take up too much of your time. We're so grateful for you doing this interview with us. We really.
Oh yeah, I'm happy to do it. And
yeah, it's been great. The last question I had for you is to get a sense of how you feel about the state of the business today, and has your approach to releasing your music changed at all?
Oh, the music business?
Yeah.
It's a shit show, man. It's terrible. It was it's always, I guess, been a shit show, but streaming has just completely annihilated, a huge portion of your income, unless you're streaming in the billions like Beyonce or somebody. It's completely annihilated that. And of course, the response to that issue was, well, now more people are hearing your music, and so they're coming to see you live. And so, and in all fairness, live performances did benefit from it because I think there was some truth to that. But then COVID happened and 2020 happened, and all of a sudden you couldn't tour either, and there was just no revenue, and it was really, it decimated a whole part of the infrastructure of our business because a lot of smaller venues closed, and a lot of bigger venues got bought by one or two corporations, and it's become, it's harder than it's ever been, I think, to make a, unless you're a superstar. And if you're just what I consider us a working class band, and we're lucky, we're a lucky working class band because we've got the Heathens, we've got these super loyal fan base that has supported us through thick and thin and stood by us, and whatever left turns we might have taken artistically or politically or whatever, they've been all in for that, and they stood by us during the lockdown, and would buy tickets to see me play in my in my music room when I couldn't go out and play and things like that. But it is hard. It's a very tough time for the business right now, and I worry a lot about the future of it. Yeah. Not just for us, but for especially for young up and coming bands.
Yeah.
Because I love. I mean, as a music lover and record buyer, I mean, I'm still like I was when I was a teenager. I still go out and spend, money I don't have to spend on buying new records. And, I've got my vinyl collection actually right here. And which is, part of what I do to support bands in this era of streaming is I buy if they put out their record on vinyl and it's something I've been listening to a lot, I'll make sure I go and buy a copy, and as well as support them by seeing them live whenever possible.
I buy the merch.
Yeah.
I always buy the merch.
Yes.
Yep. It's enabled us to survive.
Yeah. We for my band during COVID, we did online sessions. It's a lot in Australia. Very difficult to be a full-time musician. It's just not the population to support that sort of career. So most of us have other jobs that we have to do. So we do that. But I designed a range of merchandise to support the members of my band that are full-time musicians that COVID just annihilated. And that helped us through as well. It was really something else. I was wondering also if we could impose on you to do a promo for our show, if that's all right.
I'd be happy to.
We would absolutely love it. You'd be our first promo, so we'll be playing you on every single show. It'll be the only one we have. So the show's called Deep Blues.
Deep Blues, okay.
Yeah, with Big Mama and Greg Noonan.
I'm sorry, Big Mama and Greg
Noonan.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yeah.
All right. I've got a friend whose last name is Noonan back in Athens, Georgia. So,
and we're on East.
So Big Mama and Greg Noonan and Deep Blues
on East Side 89.7 FM.
We can write it down and hold it up.
Oh Lord, that actually would help me because my mind is so addled.
He's a paper, so don't you worry about that.
While she's doing that, is this guy's is his surname spelled Nunan or is it Noonan? Do you know?
Noonan.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Mine's Nun. We'd still be related somewhere along the line.
Okay. Yep, she's a musician in Athens, a really good player, and has a small studio in town too. But as well as a dog groomer. But yeah.
I'm looking at Big Mama's writing. She's actually got nice writing.
Well, boy, I don't. No one would be able to read mine.
Well, I kind of had to because I'm a left-hander. Like, I'm naturally a terrible writer.
Yeah, I'm a lefty too. You a lefty or a righty?
I think I was supposed to be a lefty, but I'm not. And I think that might be why my handwriting is so abysmal, because I have memories as a kid of
school
way back, people taking the fork or whatever out of my left hand and putting it in my right hand, which I know you're not supposed to do, but I was raised in the 60s when,
when they did that.
People did a lot of things they weren't supposed to do with kids, but So I think I was supposed to be a lefty, and I think that's why my writing's so abysmal.
Used to go out driving, sometimes late into the night, 21, fucking around and wasting gas. Across the bridge to Sheffield, and out into Tuscumbia, where the main street's a time trip to the past. Behind the Hotel Grand, there was a flaming dumpster. I saw a group of Klansmen in their robes. I circled back, but they had vanished like rats, leaving nothing behind them but some smoke. So if you'd like to tell your story, by all means go tell your story, but don't forget you only have one side. So parlay your inner visions with the usual suspicions and make your grand approach to the divide. And when you're changing lanes and passing on the right, check your blind spot and signal your intent. I saw that Honda full of girls airborne into the trees in the pouring rain, Interstate 10. Used to go out driving, sometimes late into the night, trying to make sense of the pieces of my life. Still young enough to not know how the puzzle fit together. Nothing to fall back on but a knife. The bombed out looking factories on the east side of town, blasting "Here Comes a Regular" on 10. An epiphany, a moment of clarity, driving all alone at 4 a.m. In a van full of stink, we set out upon the plains with black hills and Rockies and Cascades. We had never been out west, at least not further out than Texas, and our lives spread out before us like a page. An unwritten novel, our Huck Finn adventure, come to life. We were living in